Today we turn our attention to the Presidential Campaign trail and the ongoing nominations of members of Parliament, a critical moment in Uganda's electoral calendar. The season has so far been marked by what has been described as unexpected calm, despite earlier fears of violence and militarization. The question we are now asking is whether the calm reflects political maturity or the calm before the storm. At the same time, questions linger about the integrity of the nomination processes, monetization of politics, selective application of the law, and whether our electoral institutions can ensure a level playing field. Good morning and welcome. This is Focus on Parliament on Civic Space TV by the Center for Constitutional Governance. My name is Caroline Ayot. Over the next 2 hours, we'll unpack these issues, looking at campaign dynamics, party processes, representation, and what it means for the future of Uganda's democracy. On the panel today, I, of course, have Professor Ndebesa Mwambutsya, Charity Ahimbisibwe, and Talwana Ernest. And we're going to dive right into the conversation without, wasting time. I would just like your introductory thoughts on the campaign trail so far and what new patterns you've observed, but also what toxic patterns are being repeated. Professor Ndebesa, please open the conversation for us.
Thank you, and good morning to the viewers and listeners out there. It's good to be here and have and share with you issues of national importance. This time, talking about the electoral process in Uganda and whether it is going the right way or the usual way, but to evaluate it and have a conversation about it. So far, we are saying that this electoral process may not seem to be high-heated like the previous ones in terms of shooting people, but definitely I can see some tear gas. I see some selective application of the law, and we are yet to see more. And by and large, by the way, we didn't even start on a good note, in the sense that following the rightful ideal procedures, we should have begun with the law, electoral law, reform of the electoral law. It was not done, and therefore what the judges and the judiciary had recommended was not followed. That one was missed out. We also started on a controversial note of the Electoral Commission, because I think some new members were appointed, but there is no consensus about the administration of the electoral process. There is no consensus because there is still controversy about the mode of appointment. When it comes to policing the elections, there is no consensus equally, because the opposition still claims that the security forces are biased. And you can see others are allowed to hold the processions, others are not allowed. Still there is that controversy. If we go to adjudication of the electoral process, you find that the judiciary doesn't seem also to be independent. In the case I have in point, that we have in point these days, is these ladies who wanted to stand in Bukedia, women representative district, and they were deleted. Then they took the case even to the courts. And the judge now says he will pronounce himself on their case on 27th. And yet nominations are ending today. So what use now is that pronouncement if it will have been overtaken by time? So the electoral exercise is going on, campaigns are going on. Of course, the use of money, as usual, is involved. And by and large, I think this is a system that is not ideal, in the sense that it is also dominated by patronage, the patronage system. We are undertaking an election exercise under the patronage system, where you have the patrons and the clients, and in between, you have the brokers. You have the patron or patrons, you have the brokers here, and you have the clients. So you find that actually the reflection of the outcome of elections will not be reflecting political support genuinely coming from the conviction of the voters, but it will be coming from that transactional electoral exercise where you are a client, not actually a supporter, and you have brokers in between, normally who are MPs and some government officials. Those are brokers, and then you have especially the president, who is a patron. So the exercise is not about genuine support for policies or this way or the other, or undertakings this way or the other, but it is a transactional system, a patronage system, where you have the patron or patrons, you have the brokers, you have the clients. And the more the brokers are needed to get more clients, the more we are going to have more MPs, more districts, more municipalities, more cities, more this and that, because it is a transactional business. And that's why it involves a lot of money.
Thank you, Professor. Before you preempt our entire conversation, Charity, have you observed anything new, or what old patterns have you seen reoccurring, aside from the ones that Professor has managed to identify?
I think that it is important to continue to emphasize what Professor is identifying for very many reasons. One, if you've listened to some of the presidential candidates like Robert Kyagulanyi Ssentamu, the other day on the campaign trail, he said this might be the last election when Ugandans decide on their president. What that means is that we'll be changing the electoral system from adult suffrage to a parliamentary system. And those are two distinct systems of choosing your leaders. Whether it's true or not, it's a thing civil society had projected would happen with this electoral cycle. Amongst the things that we had in our, we normally used to have what we called scenario building sessions. So we had built a scenario around the parliamentary system, and we thought it was going to take off in 2026. It didn't take off with this electoral cycle, but every indicator is now showing that the next electoral cycle is going to be a parliamentary system in Uganda. When you take the power away from the people, what does it mean? Because the 1995 Constitution is entirely a people's constitution. It is a constitution that recognizes that we came from the war, and from the war, citizens then took charge of their own affairs. In land, it recognizes the effort of the citizens. In judiciary, it says that the judiciary will decide on behalf of the citizens. Now, when you take them away from voting, what are you saying? You're saying that then the state will become more dominant than the citizens. Is that what the people of Uganda want? We need to reflect on that. That is one. Two, I think what Professor is saying, Professor has told us that there's been a lot of injustice through this electoral cycle. And it is true that we have not seen as much injustice as we are seeing in the 2026 process. It is a quiet process where injustice is massive. It is not a loud process where the injustice was so bare and we could see it, but the injustice is real in terms of we should not just say, for justice to happen, it should not just be perceived, it must be done. So if people can find their names off a voter's register and they have no credible explanation from the Electoral Commission, that's a big issue. Secondly, if up to now, 1 month to the election, we don't know for sure how many people are on the voters' register, that is an indictment on the Electoral Commission. The Access to Information Act does require that every voter should have known how many voters we have on the on the voters register from January, because that is when they did the cutoff, that's when they did the update process, that's when they did the cleaning process, the display process, and so that whole process was concluded in February. By March, voters register should have been uploaded onto the Electoral Commission website. All of us should be able to access it. That is called transparency of the process. It is not there. That is injustice. Massive injustice we're suffering with this electoral process. Another one is polling areas. Up to now, it is 1 month to the election. We don't know how many polling areas we'll have in Uganda. Previously, they had said we'll have 42,000 polling areas. The last convention we had with Uganda Human Rights Commission, the Electoral Commission said we now have 52,000 polling areas, and we have 52,000 policemen, meaning that every one policeman would have to be deployed to one polling station, would have no other policeman doing anything in this country apart from manning polling stations. Even if they brought on police constables, then would just have a small bulk, because they were thinking of bringing on 100,000 police constables. That was as of last month. As of now, this is November, we don't know whether the 100,000 police constables have actually been recruited or not recruited. Another silent process that is happening behind our backs, and we can't pry into that process. It means that the election is being held in a blackout of the citizens. That means the arm of participation, which is a key tenet in an electoral process, has been cut halfway. We have a lot of black and gray areas that are not being spelled out. So if you don't know how many polling stations you're going to work with, because even the 52,000 that Electoral Commission spoke of said they hadn't concluded on that number because they were still breaking down polling stations in Kampala. Nancy, you were there, you heard these words. They are still breaking down polling stations in Kampala. What that means is that if Professor Ndebesa was supposed to poll from Makerere University, he might wake up tomorrow and they threw him in Kasangati, and he has to vote from some polling station in Kasangati, and he has no idea about it, and he will spend polling day walking around different polling stations in Kampala, if he's really passionate about casting his vote, trying to trace his polling station. The other thing, voter education. Now, Electoral Commission has been telling us we accredited civil society organizations to carry out voter education, and they are all over the place, and they are carrying out voter education. Nancy, I have my phone here. I could clearly show you that the only SMS I've ever seen land on this phone is from my constituency with my area members of parliament saying, vote for me, I'm standing as an independent, vote for me, I'm standing on a DP ticket. How come my area members of parliament can send me a message asking for my vote, but the Electoral Commission cannot send messages to Ugandans to tell them key milestones that are happening, cannot tell them who is supposed to vote, when they're supposed to vote, why they must vote, why it is important? What the hell is the Electoral Commission doing for them to pretend everything is so perfect and the world is working perfectly for us? The election is so good, it is so in order. No, they have killed the electoral process. Yes, it might be a silent one. I'm happy about the police not being involved. I'm happy about people going and turning up at rallies when they want to turn up, but there are many other things to this process that have blinded the process from the citizens, and the citizens therefore are not participating effectively like they have done in previous elections. We saw good participation in 2001, we saw it in 2006, in 2016. Now this time, because citizens have been relegated to the periphery, what we are also going to document will be on the periphery. But it's better documented than not documented. I'll tell you that the spokesperson of the Electoral Commission, I have interacted with him more than 10 times asking for only one document. The document that shows the 230 people who expressed interest to be presidents of this country, so we can carry out a content analysis on their ages, their gender, why they were interested, background checks, contextualize them. Up to now, Electoral Commission has refused to release that information. So is it true that actually 220 people interested themselves to being president, or it is a statistic they woke up and just thought about? This is the kind of election that we go for in 1 month's time. It will be decided, most certainly. But as to whether it will bring satisfaction to Ugandans, it's a question for us to answer when we have crossed the bridge in January and February. I think like we have always seen, the only time Ugandans will sufficiently pronounce themselves with their ballot will be on the members of parliament, on the presidential. I don't see much changing there. I also thought about the question of the manifestos. You see, in an electoral process, the key thing is the jostling of ideas. There must be ideas that are competing with each other for a citizen to decide that this is what will work for me. I'll give you an example. We just changed our curriculum.
How about we come back to the conversation of manifestos, because it is part of the conversation that we'll have later. Thank you so much. Ernest, please indulge us. What is your analysis of the events of the presidential campaign trail, but also the nominations?
I'm going to stick to a point about potentially moving to a parliamentary system. The idea of a parliamentary system from vibrant democracies is that there's going to be a contestation amongst multiple parties. I'm going to draw from South Africa as an example. From the 2024 elections, there was a contestation amongst majority of the major parties down there, and they had, because the ANC did not form a majority, they had to form a government of national unity, because the ANC had become widely unpopular over the past 30 years due to economic stagnation in the country. So you look at an example of their parliamentary system, that the economy had become such a hot button topic that it shrunk the ANC's space in parliament. And when you see how a parliamentary system works in that context, and you bring it to here where clearly our civil space is shrinking, and there's one party that seems to be expanding with time, it just means that parliament will just become, for lack of a better word, a lapdog for the dominant party in the country. And if a parliamentary system is something that is becoming our reality, then we are sliding more into one party having more control than the others, and that becomes problematic in terms of sharing ideas, and it becomes difficult for there to be democratic contestation, because democratic contestations are the underpinnings of any vibrant democracy. And I personally do not see how anything will be positive coming from that, because it portends something serious, and it portends stagnation. And if I've said before on the show previously that stagnation is unhelpful for any growing nation, and regardless of whatever economic ideals or economic projects that a dominant party might bring, it's not sustainable. It's just postponing pressures, especially social pressures on the country.
Thank you so much. Now, Charity, we'll come back to the conversation that we left off earlier on. So, what the tone and strategies on the presidential campaign trails, especially in regarding issue-based politics vis-a-vis, personally driven mobilization. What is your take on that? Should we expect the manifestos to actually mean something in these elections?
So yeah, we left off at a place where I told you that in elections, proper elections are supposed to be a marketplace of ideas. When we say a marketplace of ideas, it means everybody has brilliant ideas. And you're coming on board to sell these ideas to the citizens, and they choose the best idea to go with through their vote. But what we have seen is the rhetoric, the same old story. So look at what the president, for example, said when he was in northern Uganda, and what he has been saying. He has been saying I'm going to compensate those whose land was taken, those who were affected by the hydropower system of Karuma. I'm going to make sure that the people who are affected by the war are compensated better. I'm going to bring electricity and access to electricity to more places within northern Uganda. And then what has Robert Chagulanyi been telling people wherever he has been going? He has been saying, government has let you down. If you don't change this government, you're going to continue to be in the same things. You're poor. Don't you see you're poor? Same old story. Look at what my friend Mujisha Muntu has been telling them. I've come here to Hoima. This is Hoima City. You're supposed to be in charge of the oil. You're not in charge of your oil. Government is in charge of your oil. Anyway, the acts of parliament even give the oil to government to run it on our behalf, that minerals belong to the government and they will be run on behalf of the citizens by the government. So if you tell the people that they're supposed to be in charge of their oil, you have to first do a reform on the laws as they exist. But that is not the thing that I wanted to draw. What I wanted to draw was, what are the issues that have affected us as a nation? How do you paint them for a citizen to understand? So this is what I would do if I was on a campaign trail. And I am with Shamuntu. So I've arrived. I would say, on a daily basis, 520 women die at childbirth. Do you know what 520 women translate to in Uganda? Those are 520 families. Do you know what 520 families translate to? It means the economic production at family level has been affected. What does it mean when a mother dies at childbirth? Our health system is broken down, but how many health centers do we have that are supplying us this? This is how I'm going to change it. So from the 550 health centers across the villages of here, I'm going to set up only 4 major hospitals from this region. They will be equipped this way. This is how people will be worked on. The medical doctors who are coming from here, I'll pay them like this. And this is how they're going to treat people so that we have less attrition rates of these mothers. That is my first agenda. My second agenda, education is the real backbone as to why we are where we are. If you look at Taiwan, they used the education system to become the marketplace of innovation for the US and to become the marketplace of innovation for China. Right now, the US and China compete over Taiwan because of the change in education that was responsive to a region on demands that we are changing. So as Uganda, as a strategic region, meanwhile, the president talked about tourism. See how he said it. I've left my agenda as the presidential candidate. I'm back to, to the candidates on the trail.
Yes.
So the president said, I'm going to improve tourism in northern Uganda. Northern Uganda is a place of tourism and can attract many people. Yeah, but for 40 years he has been there. He didn't know northern Uganda could be a tourism hub. And that's it. That's all he said about tourism. I'm going to make it a tourism hub. How he's going to break it down, what he's going to do exactly, how it's going to change. He didn't tackle that. But I am back to me, my agenda. I am the candidate and I am in the campaign trail. So what will I do with the education system of Uganda? I'm going to make sure that the people who come out of university and have no jobs, I'm going to find for them scholarships as a government. In countries that can accommodate them, I'll send them to Australia, I'll send them to US, I'll send them to London, I'll send them across the world to learn different skills that they will bring back to influence our country, our growth, our knowledge system. And the area I will be mostly interested in is STEM, science, mathematics, engineering, and technology. It's going to work along with my engineering and science ministry, which has developed the following technologies, because the technologies are being developed there. And this is going to improve the agriculture sector like this. This is going to improve the tourism sector like this. Now, at the end of that, a person who is an intellectual and is following the trail will actually say, yes, this is my president, and the reason why they are my president is because they are presenting ideas that are going to work for the future Uganda. Ugandans are no longer going to just be exported as migrant workers to clean people's bedrooms, to become prostitutes, because we've seen the girls are being taken into prostitution, they've come back, they've spoken. That's not what Ugandans are going to be. Ugandans are going to go out to pick knowledge and bring it back home to grow the country. So in the campaign trail that we have right now, we have the same old stories in these manifestos. We have done an analysis of 3 of the manifestos so far. There's the NRM manifesto, we've done an analysis of it. We've done an analysis of Nandala Mafabi's manifesto, and we have also done an analysis of the National Unity Platform manifesto. But the analysis we did was through a foreign policy lens. So if Uganda is growing at a certain rate of the GDP, what is going to be our foreign policy agenda going forward from now? That was our interest, and that is the angle that we took. But different people can take different angles. You can do an analysis of those manifestos on an education perspective, or on a health perspective, or on a women agenda perspective, because women have the women manifesto, and it has the women agenda. So you do an analysis of that manifesto premised on that. What we have seen is emphasis on local content, failure to focus on better foreign policy processes. And I will explain in detail what our analysis showed.
Thank you very much for that. I thought you were still going.
Being your president.
Yes, thank you so much, Professor Ndebesa.
Professor.
Yes, also Mia, we've not heard from Professor for a minute. Professor, civil society organizations, academia, and many human rights groups have come together to, pre-election season and also during the election season to campaign for this thing called peace. Peace during elections, or to campaign against, to literally talk about the actors in this electoral process, including the military and even the young people who were identified as the propagators of violence. So do you think that this campaign for peace worked? That's why we do not have that much violence during the campaign trail, but also given the history and concerns around military involvement in electoral processes, how sure are we that the security framework we have now guarantees that order and neutrality until election day and even after?
Thank you for those questions on peace. I think Martin Luther King and the Pope John Paul, the fifth or somebody like that, they said that peace is not the absence of war, or paraphrased, peace is not the absence of conflicts, that peace is a presence of justice. Peace is a presence of justice, meaning that to have peace, you must have justice. If you don't have justice, you will not have peace, or at least you will not have sustainable peace. I think that is great to know. Relatedly, and people are talking about the elections manifestos and all those things. To me, there are 2 elephants in the room. That phrase in English, having an elephant in the room, is that you have such a huge beast in the room, but people cannot see it. Meaning, when you have an elephant in the room, you are not discussing it. We have 2 elephants in the room, and people are not seeing them, and they are not discussing them. One is succession. People are not talking about succession, and yet that is the critical juncture for this country. Even historically, nations, empires have risen and fallen, kingdoms risen and fallen over the question of succession. If you don't resolve the question of succession, then whatever you are doing, whatever you are planning, whatever you are saying will come to naught. And we have not resolved the succession question, because even our constitution recognizes it. Sentence number 1 says, aware of our constitutional and political instability, blah, 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 blah. And that instability was around mainly the succession question. We have not had a president succeeding another peacefully. We have had leaders changed in pieces, if we can put it that way, in pieces, not peacefully. That is one. But also, relatedly, this other elephant related to the other one is the role of the military. The role of the military in politics, militarization of political competition. It's very critical. What are the candidates? What are the political parties? What are the political players? What are the citizens saying about the role of military intervention in politics? Now in Uganda, the military has become even so overbearing that it is now in business, it is now in environment, it is now in tourism, it is now in construction, it is now everywhere. And when you involve the military in all those different economic sectors even, it will not go away. This is proven historically, if we can use comparative study. Once you have the military in construction, in business, in trade, in whatever, it will not go away. It will continue interfering in the political systems, in the political processes, because it wants to protect its business. This has been identified in Egypt, in Pakistan, in Myanmar, and now I don't think Uganda will be an exception. So there are those two elephants in the room, which I think should be on the table for discussion as to how far we are going. This business of elections, it is just merely legitimizing the government in power. This exercise doesn't mean a lot other than saying that every 5 years, let's legitimize the government in power. We are not in this election to change government or to change systems like the patronage system. Instead, we are strengthening the patronage system. You can see the president went in somewhere in Acholi and gave them even a new district. We are going to hear him in Kabare. He probably will give them a city. He's going to go somewhere and increase these numbers. So you increase the brokers whom I mentioned earlier on. You have to increase the brokers. So what is happening in Uganda is not an exercise that will give us a new lease as which direction we are taking, but strengthening the patronage system without resolving two elephants in the room. If we don't get out these elephants, whatever we are doing, we don't have a sustainable society, we don't have a sustainable nation. The succession question. Even in pre-colonial period, succession questions were very critical. I can give you my personal example. I am supposed to be an ex. Can you imagine being ex identity? I am now an ex Muhororo. I'm supposed to be, I'm now a Munyankweri, but that means ex Muhororo. How can somebody lose one's identity and be ex? Why? It was over the succession question. There was a kingdom called Mpororo, and the king overstayed in power. In those days, in the past, like 300 years ago, people used to die younger. But for him, for some reason, he didn't die. So he became senile. And his sons decided to, they told him to hand over power. And he refused to hand over power. So what transpired is that the sons rebelled and decided each one to take one of the provinces of the Mpororo kingdom and establish their own autonomous chiefdoms. So he got so annoyed, it is said, that he committed suicide together with the drum, which was a symbol of power for the whole kingdom, and the kingdom disintegrated. But before colonialism even reached here, Ankwere was so weak because the Nkwere kingdom was so weak because of succession problems. Before that, there had been a succession crisis in Bunyoro between Kabarega and Kabumbire or somebody like that. There had always been succession challenges in these kingdoms. That is why they remained weak, and Europeans managed to come and colonize us without much resistance. So in Uganda, fellow Ugandans, and those who wish Uganda well, if we don't deal with the two elephants in the room, the succession question and the military question, because the military has been interfering in political competition in Uganda. It did it in 66, stroke 67. It did it in 71, even 79, 79 twice, because the military behind the scenes interfered to remove Rure, then to remove Binaisa, then 85, then and the military has become part and parcel of political competition in Uganda. So you find Ugandans not bothered. They are talking about education, health, and all that. All those will come to naught as long as we don't resolve the succession question. The Sudanese failed, you can see where Sudan is. The Libyans failed, you can see where Libya is. The Afghans failed, you can see where Afghanistan is. And many other examples that we can bring that have failed to address the two elephants in the room, succession and the military.
Thank you so much, Professor. We'll take a short break, and when we return, we'll be talking about internal political party conflicts spilling into national politics. This is Focus on Parliament.
Digital rights are those human rights and legal rights that allow individuals to access, use, create and publish digital media, or to access and use computers, other electronic devices and telecommunication networks. Digital rights include a right to freedom of expression, information and communication through technology, a right to privacy and data protection, a right to credit for personal works, a right to universal and equal digital access, a right to identity, a right to anonymity, a right to be forgotten, and a right for protection of minors, among others. The state's digital rights are frequently violated through various unfair actions, for example, blockage of websites and social networks, theft of credentials, unauthorized use of people's data for personal gain, privacy intrusion, online censorship, arrests and intimidation of online users, internet blockages, and the proliferation of laws and regulations that undermine the potential of technology to drive social, economic, and political development worldwide. It is hence every citizen's responsibility to respect rights of other digital users and to speak out or report to the responsible parties when one's rights are violated.
Welcome back from the break. It's still Focus on Parliament. Now we're going to talk about the internal political party disputes spilling into national elections. Ernest, this is where I get your thoughts. So from the primaries in the different political parties, we saw very many heated exchanges, especially in the NRM. And now we have certain designated contested areas because the independents are coming back, or the incumbents that lost in primaries are coming back. So how are we going to ensure how can electoral institutions and parties ensure timely and transparent dispute resolution to prevent these issues from rising, but also post-elections, because we know eventually there will be a winner and there will be a loser? How are we going to manage this, especially now that people are saying that the courts are biased?
When you look at our contestations within parties, most times we suppose it's because of issues with structure, it's issues with regard to how the nomination process is handled. Yes, there could be issues, but sometimes it just goes down to the core problem that is amongst these different, I'll call them rivals in the political space. What exactly is causing them to be petty and to refuse to step aside if they have lost? It comes down to one thing: economics, simple economics. Everyone looks at coming into the political space as a magic bullet. They look at it as their means of survival. Most don't even come on ideas. If you listen to the majority, and their ideas are usually lukewarm. There's nothing profound that any of them are saying. Most of the time, and this is the unspoken truth, is they're looking at power as a form of leverage, as a form of buying themselves a stake in the issues of the day, and to be honest, not even in the issues of the day, just a way to survive. no one is looking at Uganda as a collective, at how am I bringing in issues that are going to benefit Uganda as a whole. And that's why you'll find that regardless of party, even if it has the most well-structured and most well-meaning political process and nomination process, there'll always be infighting. And this infighting is because majority of these people are just looking at it as a means of survival. And it seeps into the national dynamic, because a lot of Ugandans, regardless of creed and status quo, is always looking for the next way to survive, and it tends to manifest in our politics. Because sometimes I will say I sit alone with myself and I ask myself, what makes us so petty? What makes us so angry with each other, especially in the political space? And you realize that it's just a case of everyone feeling that it is a do or die for me. And when everything feels like a do or die, we cannot progress as a society. All we're looking at is carving out my own space for me and the people next to me, and it creates a crabs in a barrel mentality. And as long as there's no sign of collective will for our own betterment as a people, regardless of whatever well-meaning structure is created, we'll always have these small fights pulling down each other, regardless whether it is NRM, NUP, UPC, or whichever party comes in the next 7 years or so.
Thank you so much. I have a follow-up question for that. And you said it comes down to the money, right? Something like that.
But it's a combination of things.
Material gains.
Yes, material gains. A combination of things. Material gains, and also trying to leverage your way into those material gains.
Yes, the material gains. And so the material gains belong in the places of power. And one of the most contested offices during the primaries was the female SEC, which was preempted to be for the female speaker of the Parliament of Uganda. But I would like, normally we would think that that type of vote or that type of outcome of an election like the speaker, even before people have contested in their different constituencies, we would say that we don't know who a speaker is going to be yet. But how come it's already a predicted position for a certain individual?
It's because I'm making a guess here. I'm not speaking authoritatively, but from my few observations, it seems that she got her leverage, and after getting her leverage, everyone else does not have as much significant influence as she does. I'll say this as someone who comes from Teso. There was a time whereby majority of people from that area wanted a leader based of representation, based of what mattered to each one in their collective ideals. But then something has changed recently. Every single time you travel back home, you realize that most people speak in a way of like, as long as they're bringing something in for us, we do not care. And it has changed significantly since around 2016. There's a time where it was a bit more contested in terms of what this person is bringing to the table and what they're willing to offer to us in terms of progress. But nowadays it seems less and less, and it speaks to a suppression and an apathy that is happening, especially amongst Ugandans. And I'll be speaking as someone from Teso. There's a sense of apathy that we have tried ideas are clearly not working. Let's just go with what is on ground. And it's not pleasant to speak about, but it seems to be the dynamic that is happening. And I'm not trying to be sectarian here or tribalistic, but there's this sentiment amongst people from that part of the country that we have tried to have ideas, but clearly ideas are not working for us. The people from the other part of the country are the ones taking everything, yet we here are just seated on our ideas. So they're not just playing the game as is. And it's not pleasant, but it just speaks to a general apathy amongst people.
Thank you so much, Ernest. Charity, following the line of thought, of course, we have to talk about inclusion, especially of women and youth. On the presidential ballot we already missed out. There is no young person and there is no woman on the 8-man race also. But also, let's talk about meaningful representation, especially for a group like women. We've had, I think, about 185 women legislators from the parliament that is outgoing right now, and yet for certain reasons it's like policy, especially those that we care about, like health, because we've been fighting for a 15% of the health budget to go into funding women's health for a long time, and that has not manifested ever since. So do you believe that this time, with the quality of candidature or with the political environment right now, we will manage to have women in the House who can actually present those ideas meaningfully?
Will we have women in the House who can present those ideas meaningfully?
And actually achieve something?
So you've just heard from my colleague that the politics in Uganda has become so polarized that we live in a society where ideas are now relegated to the periphery. It's no longer important to have ideas. And I think that's why Professor Ndebesa was telling me they won't work. The ideas are good, but they won't work, because we are locked in a circuit of rotating in one area. Who has the money? How do I get the money? How do I connect myself to the money? So we've lost nationalism. We've lost the spirit. We've lost the need to build Uganda. And we have the need to build self, and the need to sustain self, and the need to maintain self. That's what my colleague has just said. And so you're asking me, are there women leaders who are going to come and present the women agenda of 50% of the budget going into women health issues? They are not there. They're not there. They're going to come there looking for their own money, looking for their own survival, looking for their, making sure that the constituency where they come from is happy and they can come back to parliament the next term, and making sure that they align with the power, with the powers that be, such that they are in good books to access the money. That's what they will be doing. They will not be looking at the percentage of budget that has to come to improve a general health issue for Ugandans. That's the good idea. They are not going to do that. We had the domestic bill, the bill on domestic issues has been fronted to Parliament over and over, and it was relegated to the dustbin because of the same things. Women in that Parliament went there to look for their own ideas. When they brought the Succession Act for amendment, I had hoped that the women were going to advance the need for property and property rights for women, and what it means, and how women have suffered with a negation of these property rights. It didn't happen. The Succession Act still came back largely ungendered. Let me use that word, which doesn't exist, but it came back still skewed with sentiments of patriarchy and less involvement of both genders as a support mechanism for each other. That said, it doesn't mean we should not tell them what to do. We should tell them. Whether they pick it up or they don't pick it up, posterity will exonerate us. So when I was telling you about the manifestos, I told you that there are certain things which we want to see these leaders champion, even on the floor of Parliament. One of the things we would like to see, us as civil society, and me especially in the Electoral Laws and Governance Institute, what we'd like to see is them champion, for example, the remittance of funds from Ugandans living abroad. Why? Because when that money comes, it supports the GDP better. We would like to see them champion our foreign policy agenda. And this we have done along with alumni of foreign policy studies at the American Embassy. The American Embassy has been training Ugandans on thinking foreign policy. How do you position a country for foreign policy, to improve their foreign policy, not only in terms of analysis, but also the people that you send.
American is teaching us how to do our foreign policy.
Yes, the Americans have been training
That's very
Ugandans
interesting.
to understand what foreign policy analysis means for a country. So they pick Ugandans. We have a Ugandan who is leading the team. The trainer, the key trainer is a Ugandan, it's called Professor Ahmed. So he puts Ugandans in a, what I would call like a curative theater. And then he asks you questions
and
to
in
do
a
with
space organized by a foreigner.
Yes, it is a space organized by the American Embassy, sponsored by the American Center.
That is curious.
And it is given by the American people to us. Of course, it is a curious one, but the interesting thing for me, I don't want to go with your analysis of foreign agenda coming. No. What the Americans want us to do is to think as a country, as nationalists. If you want to grow your national policy, foreign policy, what do you do? And they've given us indicators which you can follow. And from the analysis of our manifestos now, in that curation, we were able to identify that Uganda was taken off the AGOA list. It is us who have identified, it's not the Americans who identified it for us. They dropped us from the AGOA list. We were doing
but I think
trade.
I think Trump has
has
removed it
completely. But we're doing trade with the United States through AGOA, and we're earning dollars from there. And we are saying that has been cut off. So how do we position ourselves differently? Do we see any of the presidents and their manifestos speaking to that? No, we don't see it. And we are saying if you're going to come to lead this country, then how are you going to position us for foreign policy? Okay, the Americans sponsored us and gave us a space, but we've been able to talk about the region. That there is conflict in Sudan, there is conflict in Somalia, there is conflict in South Sudan that is affecting our trade and economy here in Uganda. How do we move past those conflicts to galvanize our economic growth here? And have we seen those manifestos speak to that? We haven't. And we also looked at the question of the remittances. We said Ugandans have been remitting $1.5 billion annually to this economy. How has the government supported those Ugandans in the diaspora to be able to remit more? Is there a time, if they were supported, that we can even get $20 billion from them? It is possible if we invest in them. So for the members of parliament that are coming, they need to think beyond their personal gain and think towards country growth. Think strategic, how do we place the country in a foreign environment? What do we get when we talk about climate change and the issues of climate change and how they're going to affect our agriculture? Are we going to continue importing tomatoes from Kenya? Are we going to continue importing Irish potatoes from Kenya? Are we going to continue importing eggs from Kenya? Those are the things we want them to think about. And beyond economy, then come down to the issue you've raised. Me as a woman who is going into parliament, what one thing will I say when I leave the parliament that I did for the women movement? Yesterday I was challenging the Prime Minister. When the women movement went to meet the Prime Minister with the women movement manifesto, they told her, this is our manifesto, this is our agenda. When she was just beginning her term, she said, you women movement, you did not support me when I was coming to this office. You didn't even care that I become a member of parliament. Now that I have been named Prime Minister, you have come with your agenda. Can you imagine? She cut herself off from the agenda. She's a woman, isn't she? Isn't she in leadership? Back to where he was. Personal gain. I came alone, I've made it, I have arrived, now you're bringing your agenda. So I think what needs to change, and it's a clarion call for anybody who is standing for political office, Ugandans need to understand that we have a country, and we have a country to safeguard. The whole idea of thinking I am a medical doctor and I will work only when you have money in your hands should change. The idea of only thinking I will be in parliament for my own personal gain, I will eat 500 million, I will look for the next money to support me, I'll not look at the broader issues of who is missing, how is the military supposed to behave, how are institutions supposed to be strengthened. I'll go into judiciary, I will keep quiet, I will align myself to the system, I will not look at the clear path of the laws and how to make those laws work for Ugandans. I think we are killing our own selves at the expense of thinking we are cadres and we are good people. At the end of the day, we'll all be caught in the murky waters.
Thank you, Charity. Ernest, do you have an addition or an interjection?
I'll just simply say that the current status quo is unsustainable. As I'll refer to the analogy of crabs in a barrel. At the end of the day, if everyone is only looking to self-interest, one way or the other, it implodes, because there's a collective idea that of where we want Uganda to go. If we cannot think for Uganda as Ugandans who live in Uganda, and we think for only ourselves, every single thing you build can dissipate quickly, especially past your time, because at the end of the day we are not immortals. We have an unknown timeline, and of which at some point the good Lord will call you whenever He decides. So when we think that only I have to thrive, my family has to thrive, what are the certainties that your family will think the same way you do, or will have the same personality as you do? If we cannot think for Uganda as a whole, if we cannot look to build institutions, look to our country from a place of ideas, our country will have, rather not our country will live on before us. It is those who come after us who will look at us and will see our amateurism in terms of building our country. I will give the example of the founding fathers of the United States. Obviously everyone uses them as an example, but when you look through their federal papers and their idea of checks and balances, you realize that they were thinking for a country 3 centuries after they would be gone, and it is on this foundation that multiple checks and balances are being applied even nowadays, even to this very day, when many people are complaining about the current presidency. Their constant checks and balances is what is keeping the executive in check. And if we cannot think for our country in that same regard, if we're allowing institutions to get eroded, then those who come before us in 60 years, in 250 years, because the reality is this territory that is called Uganda will exist in some form beyond us. And if we cannot think for it in the next 250 years or so, it will haunt those who exist at that time. And obviously we will not be around to see what happens then, but they will look at us and will blame us for amateurism, and it will obviously be a problem for those who come after us.
Thank you very much. Professor Ndebesa, before I ask the next question, I think you had something to say to contribute to this same conversation.
Yeah, I did. And earlier on, I think Charity here had pointed out that the exercise we are involved in of elections is not concerned with policies. It's not a competition of policies. It's not a competition of ideas. It is not a competition of values. And that's why they are not even bothered about foreign affairs, because if you talk about foreign affairs, nobody is going to be bothered. Because the exercise we are involved in, if I can repeat myself, is again to identify who is a good patron, to identify who has got skills of a broker, to identify who has, and then the clients. You have the clients, they are looking for a good broker. And then the patrons are looking for a good broker. And that is the exercise we are involved in. It is not an exercise, as he has pointed out, of collective good, of serving a collective good. And you just go to excite people about fisheries, about comparatives, about PDM money, about this. And you go and don't identify national issues. But what this boils down to what? To again lack of a nation. You see, we are not bothered about it. We are talking as if there is a nation. There is no nation. There are fragments of communities in Uganda, and they are not yet a nation, and nobody is bothered to pursue corrective projects, corrective agendas that will keep Ugandans together, so that we think about the agenda for taking the nation and its people ahead for sustainable societies. No, it is just clients, brokers, and patrons. It is transactional. It is not about the competition of ideas. When you go beyond that, then we go into competition of hooliganism. You know, you go to social media, you go to party. Each party now, it seems to be having a dirty campaign department or section. You know, this one should abuse the other ones. This one should abuse better. This one knows how to abuse. This one knows how to malign. This one. So it's not a competition of policies, of values, of ideas to take us ahead. It's a competition of identifying patrons, a competition of identifying brokers. The MPs are brokers, if you want. Those are the brokers. And the citizens are clients. And the presidents are patrons. So this is the circus we are involved in. That's why we are not talking about the elephants in the room. How do we build a nation? How do we have a smooth succession? How do we deal with the military involvement in political competition? I think the CCG organized a commemoration of 30 years of our constitution, and we invited they invited a constitutional lawyer from South Africa. This is what he told us. He told us, leave the army out of political competition. If you don't, all these things you are talking about will come to nil. I hope people took him seriously. You see, if you are talking about succession, you think Museveni can hand over power to anybody even if you win by 90%? Can he? He said it, I remember, I recall it. He was in Ruwero at a certain function when Sanjrai and Mugabe had participated in a political exercise, election exercise in Zimbabwe, and he asked a rhetoric question and answered it. He referred to Sanjrai as this chap. He said, if this chap, do you think if this chap, that is Sanjrai, had been declared by the Electoral Commission that he had won, you think Mugabe would have handed over power to him? And he answered it. He said, no, revolutionaries don't hand over power. You see? So that is the atmosphere in which we are in. We are involved in an exercise for legitimizing patrons, legitimizing brokers, and the clients are just being participated. The citizens are not participating, they are being participated. And the issue of whether the elections will determine the wishes and aspirations of the citizens is beside the point. That's not what we are involved in. If we were really involved in that one, there should have been electoral reforms. Electoral reforms were not touched. There should have been resolving the question of independent electoral commission. That one was not resolved. We have got a partisan cadre judiciary. That one is not resolved. We have got a partisan cadre military. That one is not resolved. And then we say we are in an exercise that will be mediated by a partisan electoral commission, that will be mediated by a partisan judicial service, the judiciary, that will be mediated by a partisan police, that will be mediated by a parliament. This parliament of ours with the speaker who is just running around saying that she is going to deliver parliament to the executive. Is that what we are going to reap out of this exercise? This exercise is exciting people. I'm not excited myself. Is exciting people because they have got the opportunity to identify and maybe choose the brokers and the patron And the patrons are also excited. They are going to renew the mandate of the brokers, and the brokers are also excited that they are going to go to their clients and sell themselves to their clients, and we shall go on like this. But unless we resolve the question, the national question, unless we resolve the succession question, unless we resolve the military question, we are just groping in the darkness.
Okay, Professor, as we wrap up, I'm going to ask about the putting money in our pockets type of slogan, because you know that is the FDC slogan, but I have also seen it with different parties. The NRM says there is no reason why you're not rich in current Uganda, in the Uganda that we have today. But also different presidential candidates have had them say things like, oh, we'll give university students money when they get out of university. That is the point. So that is the point. Where is everyone going to get this money that they are promising the electorates from? As we conclude, Professor.
All those who are promising money, they know the money is not there. And they are not telling us even how they are going to mobilize that money. They are not telling us their fiscal policies and how they will be managing the fiscal issues, how they will manage collecting of money, how they will manage the debt and all that. The money thing is exciting. It excites the clients. And that is why they are fronting it, that we shall give money to this. Throwing money in the population does not develop the society. They are not talking about what Charity was talking about, like education. In education, you find that about 5 million or so people join P1. Today, as we talk, UNEB recently announced the candidates. They are around 435,000 out of 5 million. Where did the 5 million go?
Exactly.
That they are not asking that.
And
nobody
that
is asking about that.
Question.
They are not talking about the technological base for this country that will lift us out of this peasantry. They are talking about throwing a lot of, just like NRM is talking about 1 million. And so Mafari of FDC is also talking about 1 million to the village. For him, he's having village model. The other ones are having parish model. Somebody is going to tell us the sale model. Another one is going to tell us, I don't know which model. Throwing money at people, at population, is not the problem. We have to talk about the fundamental challenges of society, like technology acquisition, technology transfer, technology adoption. That's when we can talk about transforming the rural society. But can we do that? We cannot do that unless and until we resolve the national question.
The governance.
The national question must be resolved, the succession question must be resolved, and the military question must be resolved. Those are the fundamentals. Let us look at the fundamentals before we start throwing money at the village and at the family level. I think Museveni even yesterday was talking about throwing the money at the, no longer at parish and village, but at household. He was saying, let's do compensation at household level. Throwing that money at household level, village level, parish level, whatever level, is a question of exciting the clients. It's not a question of having aspirations of the people addressed by the leadership after thinking through them. It is not thinking through them, it is exciting the population. Nobody bothered about these manifestos you are talking about. Even you who are reading them, you are just wasting your time. Nobody bothered that there is a manifesto. Whether the manifesto, I can assure you in my analysis, the manifesto does not contribute even 1% of support to a candidate. Nobody bothers about the manifesto. Actually, when people come like Kyagulanyi and Museveni, because they have crowds, as long as people come and see the motorcade of President Museveni, after seeing that motorcade, that's good enough, they go home. Then when Kyagulanyi comes, as long as they see his vibe, the way he talks and the way he excites them, after seeing that, the manifesto don't, even if I was a presidential candidate, I would not even bother about those manifestos, because people will not support you because you have a manifesto. As long as you are a patron, and you have brokers and their clients so that they can have some transactions and be thrown that pieces of money. That is what they are looking at. As our colleague has pointed out, the people have now lost hope. They have reached a point whereby issues of policy don't matter, issues of ideas don't matter, issues of values don't matter. What matters is, if I'm a client, I can get something from the patron via the brokers. If you are a broker, you know that you can get something from your patron and throw some crumbs to your clients. And I finish by giving the example of our speaker, the Speaker of Parliament, Anita Mong. I've said it and I will continue to say it even now. She went to Rwengo at the function of Sise, Honorable Sise, and said that it is okay, it is right, it is in order to go and steal public resources, state funds, as long as you can bring some little of that and share it with your population. It is okay. That is not corruption. That is a speaker, the one who is supposed to hold the executive accountable, the one who is a member of SEC, of the ruling party, endorsing corruption, that it is in order, it is honorable, it is a great thing to steal public resources as long as you share them with your village mates. That was a speaker of a national parliament who is prized, who is praised, who is endorsed, who is popular with the ruling party.
Thank you.
Which wants to fight corruption. Somebody who wants to fight corruption endorses and supports overwhelmingly somebody who declared publicly, openly, that stealing public resources is fine.
Thank you, Professor.
That was a speaker of the national parliament of the Republic of Uganda.
As we wind up. Thank you, Professor. And now, Ernest, I will invite you to give us your parting shots, and then Charity will give her parting shots before we close the show.
I've said before what I would want to say right now, and I believe everyone before me has spoken at length about Uganda and our current dispensation. What I would say is, unless the citizenry at large develops a larger, I was going to use the word appetite, but that would be strange, develops a larger desire for a country beyond just monetary gain, our status quo isn't going to change, because obviously poverty is undignifying, and the problem with Uganda at large is for some reason there's this need to keep people in a certain place, and that is deeply problematic, because obviously that from what you can observe, there's a certain way the Ugandans are treated. As long as they're submissive, they can take anything as is, and that's obviously is problematic, and it keeps people having basic appetites just for more. And when people want just more, that means they cannot look at their country's growth as a whole. And when you cannot look at your country's growth as a whole, that means you're going to keep your country in a constant loop, and that loop is problematic unless it's broken. So to cut the long story short, unless we develop a collective desire for Uganda to develop on the basis of policy, on the basis of implementing certain policies, you're going to get stuck in that loop, and it will only take collective desire to break that loop that we can now desire to think beyond just basic survival. And as long as basic survival is a norm, we are going to be stuck in this constant loop.
Thank you, Ernest. Charity?
Now, I'm going to respectfully disagree with Professor that if he was a candidate, he wouldn't have a manifesto. There is no respectable electoral process that has been held in the world without manifestos. There are 4 tenets that govern elections. 1, the rule of law. 2, the respect for human rights. 3, citizen participation. And 4, free, fair, credible elections. Those 4 things do define what a true democracy is, what good governance is all about. And those 4 things are driven by document. They are driven by policy. They are driven by agenda. So if you are a candidate, you need to have to reduce your ideas into a document, and that's what we call a manifesto. That said, all the manifestos that have been analyzed lack a premise on which we can stand as a country to see our economic growth, to see nationalism built, to see Uganda changed, to see the need of the citizens transformed to be transformed. So we are going into an election, which now I want to agree with him, that is a selection. We're just going to have people who are selfish, people who are coming with personal agendas to ensure they maintain the status quo. A dangerous trajectory for our country. We need to rethink, who are we sending to parliament? Who are we sending as a local leader? And how do we influence them to see the national agenda beyond their personal agenda?
Thank you so much.
Emphasis should be on trade. Emphasis should be on agriculture and how to organize Ugandans along trade and agriculture processes.
And when the military comes in?
It's okay. It should support Ugandans organize in agriculture and trade processes. If we change the economics of Ugandans, that military will fall in place.
Thank you so much. We have come to the end of this show. I would like to thank our panelists for their thoughtful contributions, but also our studio crew behind the scenes. My name is Caroline Ayot. This has been Focus on Parliament. See you next time.